There's 193 total members of the United Nations. So a vast majority of the 193 countries in the United Nations have now recognized the state of Palestine. You know, the sign of a bad government, a bad leadership, is leadership that makes their decisions based on politics first and morality second. This is what Armenia says in their statement. I'll just read you their statement, and then we'll go from there. So they came out and said that Yerevan supports a two-state solution to the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians and is, quote, genuinely committed to establishing peace and stability in the Middle East and lasting reconciliation. This is what they said. Armenia deplores using civilian infrastructure as shields during armed conflicts and violence toward civilian populations, adding that it joined in the international community in demanding the release of the captives, or the hostages. Al Jazeera likes to call them captives. That sounds a little nicer. These are hostages, okay? So here's the thing. Armenia could have easily put out a statement that said exactly that. Armenia deplores the using civilian infrastructure as shields during armed conflicts and violence toward civilian populations. And we join with the international community in demanding the release of the captives. And they could have stopped right there, and that would have been fine, because Israel agrees with that statement. Israel is the aggrieved party here. Israel is the one that was attacked on October 7th. Everything that follows after October 7th is Israel's reaction to what was done to them, and it is completely justified. Is there suffering in Gaza? Yes. Not enough. Not enough. If there was more suffering in Gaza, if the suffering had been more acute, the war would have already been over. But because the world body is trying to, they really believe that when you have a war, the best thing to do is to support both sides of the war, of the conflict, with American tax dollars. Go and pay for both sides of the war. That's the best way to have a war. Well, that's the best way to have a war that never ends. That's the best way to go bankrupt in trying to have a war. The only way to win a war is to cause so much pain and suffering to your enemy and your enemy's people that they beg you to stop and beg for quarter. They beg for a solution. Well, the Palestinians are not begging for a solution. They feel like they're winning this war right now. And why do they feel like they're winning? Because they've now got 145 countries in the United Nations that are recognizing them as a nation. So they're like, hey, this is costing us. We're of course, some of our people are getting killed. We've lost a lot of fighters. We've lost a lot of buildings. We've got, Gaza is a mess, but we're winning. We're winning the war because we got the whole world on our side now. They're all punishing Israel for defending itself, and they're rewarding us for attacking Israel. This is great. That's the message that they're sending with this recognition. They're sending that message to the terrorists. And that doesn't help Armenia in the long run, because when terrorism is allowed to flourish anywhere, it makes terrorism more likely everywhere. And Armenia has been the victim of terror from Azerbaijan and Turkey in the very recent past. In September of last year, Azerbaijan flooded into Armenian Artsakh, an Armenian exclave, and literally murdered people, beheaded people. I've got videos of them machine gunning people's houses, and kicked out 120,000 Armenians from their homes. This is a perfect example of a government that is making its decisions based on the political ramifications and not based on what is right, not based on the ethical, the moral principles. And oh, please God, show me a country that stands first, whose government stands first on what is moral and right and could care less about the politics, and I'll show you a country that'd be worth living in. But just like the worst thing about churches is that they're all full of people, imperfect people, the worst thing about governments is that they're made up of people. And people are short-sighted and selfish. The second and third order effects of this kind of decision are going to prolong the human suffering in Gaza. They're going to prolong the human suffering in Israel. They're not going to likely, it's not going to likely make the Western world go, oh, Armenia recognized Palestine, therefore, let's let them join NATO. No, it's not going to help Armenia. It's a short-sighted decision, and it's most likely based on politics over morality, and that's always a bad thing. So it makes me very sad to say that. I love Armenia. I love Israel. The people in Armenia don't hate Israel, or at least the Israelis. Israelis that I've met don't hate Armenians. This is how governments cause wars. Governments go to war. People don't. People don't want to go to war. Governments go to war. And it's the people who suffer. So if we were to try to give Armenia the benefit of the doubt here and believe, I mean, the statement that they crafted was a very good statement. I'll read it again. Armenia deplores using civilian infrastructure as shields during armed conflicts and violence towards civilian populations. Armenia deplores that. And we join the international community in demanding the release of the captives. Nothing wrong at all with that statement. Good for you, Armenia, for crafting a very, very good statement. And they could just say, hey, this isn't aimed at Israel or aimed at Gaza, either one. It's just if the shoe fits, right? The difference is that Israel would read that statement and say, we agree with that statement 100%. Hamas would read that statement and say, absolutely not. Using civilian infrastructure as shields, that's what we do. That's how we win. Violence towards civilian populations, that's what we did October 7th. That was great. We were heroes for doing it. And that tells you what side you ought to be on in this conflict. But apparently, Armenia didn't read its own statement because it made a perfect, wonderful statement like that and then came down on the side of the terrorists. What? And I just have this to say to the government of Armenia, to whatever moron decided that it would be a good idea to recognize Palestine, shame on you. Shame on you. And I hope that the Armenian people will say that as well. And I hope that the Armenian people will demand a retraction from their leadership.